Welcome, my friend. Tonight, you will not dream alone. You'll sleep in a quiet Roman villa, where the night is long, the walls are cool stone, and the world has, for just a little while, stopped asking anything of you. In this empire of emperors and engineers, there is a kind of silence no scroll ever captured. The quiet between torch shifts, the hush of a courtyard after the last sandal has passed, the stillness of history when no one is looking. This is not a story of conquest. It is a night without battles, a night of slow footsteps and slower thoughts. So lay back. Let your body forget its weight. Let your breath fall into rhythm with ancient wind. And come with me to a quiet night in the Roman Empire, where even stone can dream. The wind moved low across the Danube, not like a scream, not like a roar, but like a long sigh from the earth itself. It was winter in the northern front. The empire's edge, far from marble palaces and crowded forums, felt like a forgotten page in a book no longer read. Here, the Roman army huddled in their woolen cloaks, surrounded not by enemies, but by silence. The kind of silence that only snow understands. Inside a modest tent, barely more than a sheet of thick canvas tied to wooden stakes, sat a man with a beard streaked in silver. He wore no crown, no purple robe, just a plain woolen cloak and eyes that had seen too many winters. This was Marcus Aurelius, philosopher, emperor, and tonight, a quiet soul seeking stillness. He didn't sleep much anymore, not here, not under this sky. The lamp beside him, a small bronze vessel, its wick glowing orange, struggled to fight back the cold shadows pooling in the corners. He leaned over the flame, hands folded, as if speaking to the fire might teach him something about patience. Outside, boots crunched in snow. A guard passed. No words were exchanged. The guard knew not to disturb the emperor after nightfall, not because of fear, but because the emperor had become something different in the night, something quieter than silence. Marcus reached for a small scroll resting on a wooden crate. It was worn, creased, a letter he never finished, perhaps meant for his son, Commodus, or perhaps for no one at all. He unrolled it, eyes scanning the ink stains and half-thoughts. Do not waste what remains of your life in guessing what others are doing or thinking. He had written that, long ago, during another campaign, another winter. Now, the words stared back at him, soft echoes of his own discipline, his own longing, a reminder that time, like this flame, burned whether watched or ignored. He placed the scroll down, gently, as if afraid it might vanish with a breeze. The wind outside shifted again, this time with flakes of snow blowing under the canvas edges. Marcus pulled his cloak tighter, but did not move closer to the fire. He liked the cold. It reminded him that he was alive. He reached into a small leather pouch and pulled out a pebble, smooth and round. He rolled it between his fingers. The old general, Lucius Verus, had given it to him years ago, said it was from a river in Judea. Something steady, he had joked, for when your thoughts are not. Marcus smiled faintly at the memory, then at the irony. Verus was gone. The stone remained. In the distance, a wolf howled, not in anger, not in hunger, but perhaps just to remind the forest it was still there. Marcus looked toward the sound, though he could not see beyond the canvas. He whispered to himself, a habit from childhood. What is within my power? What is not? He answered in silence. For the 100th time. For the first time. A soft knock came at the canvas flap. 2 gentle taps, then quiet. Enter, Marcus said, not raising his voice. A young centurion stepped in, bowing his head low. He held a clay cup, warm broth, thin but comforting. Marcus nodded in thanks. The soldier did not speak. He placed the cup beside the emperor and stepped back. Then he paused, hesitant. "May I ask, Caesar?" the boy said softly. "Do you ever fear what comes tomorrow?" Marcus looked at him. Really looked. A flicker of kindness passed through his tired gaze. "I fear forgetting who I am. More than what may come," he replied. The boy bowed again, eyes wide with something between respect and understanding. Then he left. Marcus took a sip of the broth. It was weak, barely more than water and herbs, but it warmed him nonetheless. He placed the cup down, let out a long breath, and reached for a blank scroll. This was his time to write. He dipped his stylus into the ink pot, slow, careful, like he was trying not to wake something sacred. And then he wrote, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." Another sentence, another offering to the quiet. Outside, snow piled softly. Inside, the candle flickered, casting long shadows behind him. And the emperor, no longer ruler, no longer warrior, became only a man with thoughts and a steady hand in the cold. The Danube slept. So did the camp. But not Marcus Aurelius. He did not need sleep tonight. He had the candle. And that was enough. The wick caught slowly, as if it too had to be convinced to rise from darkness. Marcus watched the flame, not like a man observing fire, but like a man watching memory return. It flickered, once, twice, then stood still, as though even fire bowed in the presence of thought. He leaned closer, elbows on the makeshift wooden desk. His breath, white mist in the winter air, danced briefly with the flame before vanishing. This candle was not imperial. It had not come from Rome. It had no wax seal, no golden holder, just a rough shape, cast from tallow by a soldier's wife in a far-off village. And yet, it burned all the same. He often thought about that, how something made with care, but no greatness, could still light the night more gently than a chandelier in the Senate. He reached for his stylus, not to write, not yet, but to feel it in his hand, the cool metal grounding his thoughts. Then he whispered, almost without voice, "Begin only when the flame agrees." The candle crackled once. He smiled. A ritual, nothing more, or perhaps everything. Outside, snow was falling heavier. The guards had rotated. A fresh pair of boots now walked the frozen dirt. He could hear the soft rustle of their cloaks, hear their muffled words, careful not to disturb the silence of the command tent. Even they knew something sacred happened inside this space each night. Marcus stared into the flame again. Within it, shapes shifted. A battle standard from his youth, the rooftops of Rome soaked in rain, the eyes of his teacher Rusticus gazing calmly across a crowded hall. A child's laugh, distant but unmistakable. Then, nothing. Just the flame. Just the stillness. His fingers moved toward the scroll, not to read, but to unfold blank parchment, the kind that had not yet decided what it would become. He liked those best. He whispered again, "What is mine cannot be taken. What is not mine cannot be kept." The words did not belong to him, not truly. They belonged to every Stoic before him. He was simply borrowing them, shaping them like river stones, placing them in the right sequence to balance the mind. He dipped his stylus and began. "Tonight the wind speaks louder than men, and that is a comfort." A pause. He waited, then continued. "Let no crown deceive me. Let no title protect me. Let only truth warm me when the world is cold. The candle did not flicker. It held steady, a good sign. His body began to relax. Not sleep, not yet, but something gentler, like the moment before sleep. That fragile breath, where the mind detaches just slightly from the body. He stared ahead, not at the flame now, but at its light. How it painted golden threads across the canvas wall of the tent. How the shadows danced like ghosts that meant no harm. He remembered something, long buried, a story his mother had told him as a boy, of a fisherman who lit one candle every night for the gods, even when storms had ruined his nets, even when there was no supper. Why does he keep lighting it? He had asked, and his mother had smiled. Because some lights are not meant to bring help, only hope. Marcus closed his eyes at the thought. The flame remained. He let the stylus fall gently to the desk, not from fatigue, but because the writing had served its purpose. Now, the listening must begin. He leaned back, hands folded, spine straight, a posture of stillness, of alert surrender. The fire did not judge, the air did not press. The world waited. If I die tonight, he thought, then let it be as I am, quiet, honest, awake. But he did not die. He remained, and so did the candle. The wind pressed harder now, a low sigh against the tent walls. But inside, the flame stood its ground. One small rebellion against the night. And Marcus Aurelius, emperor, philosopher, son, father, soldier, man. He bowed slightly to it, as if to say, "Thank you for staying awake with me." He reached for the cup of broth from earlier, still warm, barely, but that was enough. He sipped. He closed his eyes for a moment longer, let the silence of the flame enter his chest like a prayer made of nothing but breath. And then he smiled, because the candle was still lit. And that was everything. He sat still, but the weight never left. Not on his shoulders, not on his back, but somewhere deeper. Somewhere thought could not reach, and sleep could not heal. The crown, though absent, was always there. Not in gold, nor in shape, but in pressure. An invisible gravity that pulled even when he was alone, especially when he was alone. The candle burned quietly beside him. Its flame no longer danced. It had entered the phase of steadiness, that moment between rise and flicker. Marcus looked down at his hands, calloused, dry, worn by years of ink and rains and cold. These, he thought, are not the hands of a god. Yet to millions, they were the hands of Rome, hands that signed laws. That offered mercy. That wrote words people read long after they were meant to be forgotten. He turned his palms upward, as if to show the world, this is all I have, just flesh and choices. The wind pressed faintly at the tent again, a reminder that the empire had borders, and those borders breathed. He closed his eyes. For a moment, he imagined dropping the crown into the snow, letting it sink, letting it vanish, letting it rest where no one could find it, or expect anything from it. But he didn't, because he knew, you do not wear the crown. The crown wears you. There had been days, long ago, when he believed leadership was a matter of virtue. That reason could guide rule. That justice could flow like water. He still believed that. But now, he also believed in fatigue. He had learned that being emperor was not about ruling people. It was about carrying the consequences of what people do. He sipped the last of the broth. It had cooled completely, but he drank it anyway. Because when the body is burdened, it does not ask for flavor. It asks for warmth. And tonight, Warmth was in short supply. He thought of the Senate, the endless debates, the hollow flatteries, the voices that praised when it was safe and vanished when it wasn't. He bore no hatred, but he did feel distance. That strange loneliness of being seen, but never truly known. He once told a friend, "The emperor is the most surrounded and the most alone." Tonight, the words returned to him. They floated above the flame, then dissolved, like breath on glass. He leaned forward, elbows resting on the desk, chin in hand. A child's posture, unroyal, but honest. He whispered, perhaps to the candle, perhaps to himself, "Tell me, does duty end when no one is watching?" The candle said nothing, but it listened, and sometimes that was enough. He reached for his journal again. Its pages knew more of him than any courtier. He opened it and wrote only one sentence. "What is heavy must be carried with both hands, and with neither pride nor resentment." He stared at the words, let them sit, let them breathe, then closed the book. Not all answers came in ink. A sound outside, footsteps again, then a voice, low, familiar. "Caesar, are you still awake?" It was Claudius, his old aide, a man who had followed him through 5 campaigns and buried 3 sons. Marcus nodded, though the man could not see. "I am," he said gently. "Come in, if the wind allows." The flap opened, letting in a burst of frost. Claudius stepped in, cloak heavy with snow. He bowed, but not deeply. Their formality had long since melted into something more human. "Any news?" Marcus asked. "No attacks, no movement. The men are calm," Claudius replied, then paused, hesitant. "But they speak of omens." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Which ones?" "A crow that circled 3 times. A dream one of them had fire from the river." "Usual things, Caesar." Marcus gave a faint smile. "Fear is always loudest in winter," he said. Claudius nodded, then looked at the candle. "They say you never let it go out." "I don't," Marcus replied. "Why?" Marcus looked into the flame. "Because it reminds me that even when I cannot sleep, I can still hold the light." Claudius said nothing. He simply bowed again and left. The tent returned to silence. Marcus exhaled slowly, as if releasing thoughts too heavy for words. And again, he felt the crown, not above him, but within, not in weight, but in the shape it had carved in his life, and he accepted it. He did not fight it, because some burdens were not meant to be lifted, only understood. The candle burned lower now, but still it held, and so did he. And in that quiet camp, beneath the cold stars of a quiet empire, a man who ruled the world sat in stillness and let it all be. The fire dimmed just enough to show its age, the flame thinning, growing transparent, like a memory returning without certainty. Marcus reached for the small wooden chest beneath his writing bench. Not ornate, not imperial, just a weathered box, stained by travel, sweat, and time. Its hinges creaked. The sound, soft, rusty, stirred something ancient in the air. Inside were the scrolls, letters, fragments, margins filled with ink-smudged thoughts. Not orders, not war reports, not matters of state, but thoughts, philosophy, whispers from the dead. He picked one without looking, as if the scroll had chosen him, not the other way around. The parchment unfurled slowly, the scent of old ink and dry paper rising gently like dust in sunlight. His eyes scanned the first line. To live each day as if it were your last, without frenzy, without apathy, without pretense. Epictetus. He knew the words before reading them, but tonight, They sounded new. He mouthed them again, without frenzy, without apathy, without pretense. He let the last word hang. Pretense. That strange veil emperors are told to wear, yet must pretend isn't there. He smiled faintly, not from amusement, but from recognition. The kind of smile one makes when meeting an old teacher in a dream. He rolled the scroll tighter, kissed the edge of the parchment with the same reverence others gave to relics, then reached for another. This one was thinner, a personal letter from Junius Rusticus, his mentor, his anchor, the man who first handed him a copy of Epictetus's discourses. His handwriting was narrow, slanted, like it had been racing against time. Marcus read aloud, "Do not be too proud of restraint, nor ashamed of indulgence. What matters is clarity, clarity without cruelty." He paused. His eyes did not water, but his chest did tighten. Rusticus had taught him how to think, not what to think, had taught him that virtue was not performance, but patience, and above all, that a ruler without inner clarity was merely a louder version of the mob. He sat back, letting the scrolls rest on his lap. The candle flickered, acknowledging the silence like an audience listening from afar. He whispered, "What would you tell me now, old friend?" The wind outside stirred slightly. The tent did not move, but the words remained. He reached for the third scroll, the one tied with dark red string, not for philosophy, but for comfort. This was from Fronto, his old tutor in letters. Fronto had been less a Stoic and more a human. He taught Marcus how to speak with beauty, even when the truth hurt. He opened the scroll. The ink had faded in some places, but he knew the words by heart. "Sleep, dear boy. Not because the world is just, but because you are not called to fix it tonight." Marcus exhaled, not from breath, but from something deeper. Fronto had understood him even before he understood himself. The scroll slipped from his hands, gently landing beside the others like a petal on snow. He sat in stillness, surrounded not by guards nor advisors, but by voices, whispers, the dead speaking softly, each line a thread, each phrase a hand on his shoulder. He was not alone, and that tonight mattered more than any council of war. He whispered again, "If wisdom does not survive in flesh, then let it travel by ink and arrive one night when a tired man needs it most." He meant it. Tonight, that tired man was him. A breeze slipped through the lower edge of the canvas, lifting the corner of one scroll. The candle's flame danced in response, casting the tent walls with moving shadows, like the scrolls were speaking with their hands. Marcus watched. He had commanded legions. He had debated senators, but he had never, ever heard anything louder than the silence between the lines of a philosopher's letter. He picked up his own journal. He turned to a fresh page. He did not write with fire. He wrote with echo. "Let my mind be a scroll others will one day open. Let my life be a quiet letter, addressed to anyone who seeks stillness." He paused, let the ink dry, then smiled. The kind of smile only ghosts understand. The candle burned low now, but steady. Outside, the snow fell slower, not because the storm had ended, but because the moment had changed. Inside, the emperor sat among the words of the dead and listened, not to fight sleep, not to fill time, but to remember. Because memory, too, is a kind of wisdom, and sometimes it arrives on parchment, in winter, in silence, in the flicker of a small candle, and a very long night. The candle blinked, just once, a soft lean to the left, then right again. Marcus noticed, and without meaning to, he remembered Rome. Not the Rome of statues or orators, not the marble senate or golden triumphs, but his Rome, the quiet one, the one with jasmine on the window ledges and sandals echoing in tiled halls. He closed his eyes. The cold around him didn't vanish, but the mind warmed. He could see it. The soft flicker of oil lamps along the colonnades, the air sweet with spring dust and violets, and the faint hum of a lyre playing somewhere, distant, but near enough to believe in. He was 16, still called Marcus Annius Verus, not yet Aurelius, not yet emperor, just a student and a dreamer. He had snuck out of his quarters, past sleeping tutors, past the mosaic of Minerva on the atrium floor. He carried a scroll, not because he was assigned to read it, but because it whispered to him when others did not. Epictetus. Again. Always Epictetus. But that night, the words felt lighter. Not burdens, not doctrines, just seeds waiting to fall into the right soil. He had sat beneath a fig tree. Its leaves shimmered under torchlight. He read slowly, mouthing each phrase like a prayer he was too young to fully grasp. If you wish to be good, first believe you are not yet wise. The sentence made him smile. He didn't feel wise, but he did feel something. Hope, perhaps. Not in the empire, not in fate, but in stillness. Even then, he knew that quiet was the truest teacher. He remembered the rustle of robes, his mother, Domitia Lucilla, approaching. She didn't scold him, she only said, "You always sit too close to the flame, my son." And he replied, "I like to see what burns." She knelt beside him, took his hand. They sat in silence, until the torch began to die. Marcus opened his eyes, back in the present, back in the tent, back in snow. But the memory had left something behind, a warmth not from fire, but from remembering who he was when no one else had decided it yet. He reached for his journal again, wrote simply, "Do not forget the boy, even when the crown sits heavy." He sat back, stared at the candle, and for a moment, he saw the fig tree in its flame. He whispered, "Rome is not a city. It is a memory that walks beside me." He thought of Fronto again, of the long walks through the libraries, of afternoons debating rhetoric not for argument, but for the joy of precise thought, of young voices echoing in marble chambers, voices now silent, but not gone, because memory is a place. He rose from his bench, stretched slowly, walked to the back of the tent, opened a small leather satchel. Inside, a single red ribbon, worn, torn at the ends. It had once tied his first scroll, the one Fronto gave him at 13. He ran it between his fingers. Time had faded it, but not erased it. He tied it gently around his wrist, not for sentiment, but for centering. He whispered, "Let me return, not to rule, but to remember." The candle nodded, or maybe the wind shifted, but it was enough. He sat again, sipped the cooled broth once more, let his body return to stillness. The night outside howled gently, but inside, a boy still read beneath the fig tree. A mother still watched with quiet pride. And Rome was not marble. It was breath. It was memory. It was a flame that did not burn, only glowed. And Marcus would carry it into sleep. The candle burned low, not dying, but entering that delicate phase where flame becomes whisper. And in that whisper, Marcus heard them. Not ghosts, but presences. He wasn't mad, at least he hoped not. But solitude opens a door, and silence holds a key. Tonight, both had turned the lock. He closed his eyes, slow as snowfall. The world narrowed, the sound of the wind receded, the scent of melting wax thickened, and suddenly, they were there, sitting in the tent with him. First, Epictetus, old, with eyes like coals that never fully dim. His voice, calm, with a rough edge, like sandals on stone. He didn't greet Marcus, just looked at him and said, "Tell me, what chains you tonight?" Marcus didn't answer right away, because the answer was simple, and also not. "Memory," he replied, "and responsibility." Epictetus gave a slight nod. "Good. At least it is not illusion." Next, Seneca, refined, draped in a philosopher's cloak but smiling like a conspirator. He leaned forward, elbows on invisible knees. "What worries you, Emperor? That you do not sleep? Or that you still care so much about whether you should?" Marcus chuckled under his breath. "Both," he said. Seneca grinned. "Then you are still human. Congratulations." Then came Rusticus, older than memory, wearing not a toga but the robes of discipline. His gaze was softer than the others, not demanding, not even expectant, just knowing. "You write every night, Marcus, but do you listen every morning?" Marcus bowed his head. "I try," Rusticus replied with only, "Try less, be more." A silence followed, not empty, full, like a pause in music, heavy not from sound, but from what had just been played. Marcus looked up at the three men. They did not shine. They did not float. They were simply there, present, real in the way dreams sometimes are, too textured to doubt, too fleeting to hold. He spoke. "You all left before me. You gave me words, and now I try to live them." Epictetus replied, "Then suffer nobly," Seneca added, "and fail joyfully." Rusticus finished, "But above all, remain." Marcus felt the weight in his chest shift, not lift, but redistribute, like a boulder gently becoming part of the ground. He opened his eyes, and the tent was empty again. But not, because something lingered, like heat in a stone after fire. He reached for his journal, wrote one sentence. "They did not speak to me. I spoke to myself, in their voices." Then he paused, added, "Which is all the dead ever are." Us, in another key. Outside, the wind whispered, almost like breath against canvas. Inside, the candle flickered once, twice, then steadied again. Marcus whispered, "I am not wise, but I listen, and perhaps that is a kind of wisdom." He let his head rest against the canvas wall, closed his eyes again, not to sleep, but to sink, to descend, into that quiet room of the mind where old friends still wait by the fire. They didn't stay long. The dead rarely do. But their chairs were still warm, and their voices still echoing. Even after the candle burned low, even after the tent fell silent again, even after the emperor returned to stillness, and once more became a man, listening to what the world no longer says aloud. The candle burned lower now, not tired, just settled, like a storyteller who knows the tale has not yet reached its deepest part. Marcus reached for a different pouch, older than the scroll case, softer than leather should be. Inside, folded parchment. No wax seals, no titles, just 3 letters, unsent, unread, unfinished. He placed them on the desk, laid them like relics on an altar, then opened the first, to his father, the man he barely remembered, died when Marcus was just a child. He had written this letter when he was 24, when he first sat among senators, too young to drink wine but old enough to make law. He read it aloud now, not for the tent, not for the candle, but for the silence. I do not know your voice. I do not know your scent, or your laugh, or your favorite food. I do not know how you held me, but I know you must have. The next lines. His handwriting trembled slightly. I wish I could speak to you as a man, to tell you what I carry now, to ask how you bore it, or if you ever felt afraid. He paused, closed his eyes, then whispered the last line. I hope I've made you proud, though I no longer know what your pride would look like. He folded the letter slowly, as if each crease was a scar being retouched. He did not cry. He breathed, and sometimes that's harder. Next, he opened the second letter, to Commodus, his son, his heir, the child of his blood, and the burden of his soul. He had written this the year Commodus turned 15, the year the boy stopped being a child, but never truly became a man. Marcus read, I love you, and I fear what that love has made me blind to. A pause. Then, you carry my name, but not my hunger. You wear the purple, but not the weight. I look into your eyes and I see fire, but not the kind that warms. He stopped reading. That was enough. He folded the page, more carefully than the first, as if hoping that care might reach the boy it never saved. And then, the last letter. It was unmarked. No name, no greeting. Because it was for himself. Not as emperor, but as Marcus. Just Marcus. He opened it. The ink had faded, but not enough to silence it. You are tired. That is not weakness. You are unsure. That is not failure. You are still searching. That is not shame. He touched the paper. It felt warmer than the others. You carry a world, but you are not the world. Let go, Marcus, just for tonight. Let someone else, even the stars, hold the empire for you. He folded that letter too, but kept it in his hand, held it like a stone or a prayer. The candle flickered gently, as if nodding in agreement. He whispered, 3 letters, none delivered, and yet they speak more clearly than 1,000 decrees. He placed them back into the pouch, tied it shut with steady fingers, then leaned back, not to rest, but to remember. The night pressed closer. The snow outside muffled the world. Even the wind had slowed. Like it too was listening. Marcus sat beside the words he'd never send, beside the man he would never meet, beside the son he would never truly understand, and beside himself. All 4 present in one room, a council of ghosts, hopes, and unanswered questions, but still peaceful, because not all letters must arrive. Some simply need to be written and then kept close to the heart. The wind rose without warning, a low moan first, then a sweep of cold across the tent canvas, then a full voice, sharp, furious, relentless, a storm, winter's voice, speaking in roars. But inside, the candle did not waver, and neither did he. Marcus remained seated, hands on knees, back straight, eyes open. He did not flinch when the ropes groaned. He did not turn when the flaps slapped like a war drum. He simply breathed. He'd heard storms like this before, over mountains, over seas. But tonight, it was not just wind. It was challenge. It was chaos, knocking at the edge of order. It was nature, reminding man who still ruled the skies. He closed his eyes and imagined the Stoics sitting beside him again. Epictetus would say, "What difference does the wind make if your soul does not tremble?" Seneca would smile, "Let it shout. You need not reply." Rusticus would only nod, as always. The storm struck harder now. The wooden pole at the center of the tent quivered, not from collapse, but from effort, like a soldier holding a shield against the unseen. Marcus whispered to it, "You are not alone. We hold together." And the pole did not fall. A flask tipped from the shelf. The scroll case shifted. One parchment blew across the floor like a lost leaf. Still, Marcus did not move. He stared at the flame. Its core was still gold, its edge still blue. It bowed once, then stood tall again. He nodded to it, the only soldier here more steadfast than he. He thought then of fear, of what it used to mean. As a boy, fear had been loud, shadows under beds, whispers behind curtains. As a man, fear had changed. It no longer shouted. It questioned. Are you enough? Will you fail? What happens when they all look to you and you do not know? He had faced those storms too. Some passed, some didn't, but none had unseated him. Not yet. He rose, slowly, took the edge of his cloak and wrapped it tighter, walked to the entrance of the tent, and opened it. Just a sliver, just enough. The wind hit him like a hammer of ice, but he did not step back. He stood there, face to the gale, eyes narrowed, and whispered, I see you, I hear you, but I will not run from you. The storm did not answer, but it knew it had been acknowledged, and that was all it ever wanted. He closed the flap again, sat once more, took the fallen parchment and smoothed it out. It was blank. He smiled. A new page, he thought. A good sign. He picked up his stylus and wrote, Even the storm seeks meaning. Then paused, added, Let mine be found in calm. Time passed, but could no longer be measured. The storm raged, the candle burned, the man remained, unmoving, but not unmoved, because even in stillness, the soul journeys. Even in silence, the heart speaks. Even in storm, the philosopher listens. He leaned back again, closed his eyes, and this time smiled, because the wind no longer frightened him. Not because it was weaker, but because he was stronger. Not in muscle, not in voice, but in choice. And that was all that mattered. The storm had passed. Not entirely, but enough. The tent no longer swayed. The ropes no longer moaned. Only the candles spoke now, in soft flickers. And Marcus, finally, leaned back. His neck met the rough canvas wall. His eyes closed, not from exhaustion, but from permission. And in that pause between breaths, she arrived. He didn't open his eyes. He didn't need to. Faustina always entered quietly, not from politeness, from understanding. Some presences don't need doors. He could almost smell her, cypress, wool, and something else, warm like bread, sharp like citrus. He smiled. I'm glad you came, he whispered. No answer. Just a feeling, a shift in the air, as if something had exhaled beside him. He imagined her sitting across the table, not dressed as empress, but as wife. As the girl he first saw laughing with dust on her nose during a spring parade, before the Senate, before the campaigns, before the wait. Just Faustina, and just Marcus. He opened his eyes. She wasn't there, of course, but that never stopped the dead from visiting. He whispered, I'm sorry I didn't say it enough. Silence. That you were strong, not in shadow of me, but in defiance of the role they gave you. He remembered. The way she held the reins better than most soldiers. The way she sat through speeches with a look that said, "Do you believe yourself?" The way she soothed Commodus, with neither flattery nor lies. She had been his mirror, and sometimes his mercy. He thought of their last day, not her last breath, but their last day together. A garden, a bench, 2 cups of fig wine, no talk of Rome, just bees, and a bird that refused to fly from her hand. He had laughed then, and she had said, "Not all things need to escape." He reached toward the side of the bench, as if his hand might find hers in the dark. Of course it didn't, but he left it there anyway. He whispered, "You knew, didn't you, that I would end up alone, and yet you never warned me." And in that stillness, he heard her voice, not as sound, but as memory sharpened by longing. "I did not warn you because I trusted you would survive it." He closed his eyes. That was her, always direct, never cruel, always right. He reached for his journal again, not to write, but to hold. The leather had softened with years. He whispered as if dictating, "Grief does not end, but it changes its tone, from scream to sigh to shadow to companion." He breathed, added, "I do not speak to you, Faustina. I speak with you. Every night I sit here. And you never miss a visit." The candle dimmed as if bowing its head. The parchment on the table rustled. But no wind had entered. And for a moment the tent smelled like cypress again. And Marcus closed his eyes and did not sleep, but rested, not in weariness, in memory, in presence, in the place between sorrow and peace, where the ones we loved still live, in the quiet we create for them. The candle's flame danced, not from wind, but from something inside the tent, a heat that was not warmth. Marcus sat still, but his hands were tighter now, his shoulders drawn inward. A different kind of silence settled, heavy, deliberate. He was not alone in the memory that visited him now. It had been 2 winters ago, not far from this same camp, another storm, another fire, and a man, young, frightened, wild-eyed, dragged before the emperor, a Roman soldier, one of his own, accused of desertion, guilty, but not of malice, of fear. The trial had been swift. The centurions had demanded blood. "If you do not punish him," they said, "we will lose discipline. He will not be the only one." Marcus had listened as the man wept, as he confessed, as he begged, not to live, but to be remembered as more than a coward. Marcus had looked at his generals, then at the sky, gray and low and full of ash, and he had nodded. The sentence was death. Quick, clean, necessary. And afterward, he had vomited behind the supply tent. He did not write in his journal that night. He did not sleep. He sat by the fire and stared into it, just like now. He reached forward, back in the present, and lifted the candle slightly. The heat kissed his palm, but he did not pull back. He held it there, not to punish himself, to remember what power feels like, not when it is used, when it is unavoidable. He whispered, "A ruler must be both blade and balm," then shook his head. But no soul should learn to enjoy the cutting. He thought of the young soldier's face. He had not looked angry. He had looked relieved. "Thank you," the man had said, "for not hating me." Marcus had wanted to weep. But emperors do not weep in public, even when they should. He leaned back, eyes on the tent ceiling, then spoke aloud. "If justice is only law, it is tyranny. If it is only mercy, it is chaos. If it is only fear, it is empire. But if it includes grief, then, perhaps, it becomes wisdom. He took his journal again, wrote, "No man should decide death quickly. Let even the cruel die slowly, in our judgment, if not their breath." Then paused, added, "The philosopher wields no sword, but sometimes the emperor must." He closed the journal, sat back again. The candle flickered, and in the flame, for just a moment, he thought he saw a face. Not the soldier's, his own. Not now, but younger, harder, less kind. He blinked, and the image was gone. But the question remained, who are you becoming? He stood, walked to the tent's edge, opened the flap. Outside, a few guards walked the snow-lit perimeter. One of them looked up, startled to see the emperor awake. Marcus raised a hand in greeting. The man bowed low. Marcus said nothing, but as he turned to go back inside, he whispered, "May I never mistake fear for loyalty." He returned to his bench. Saturday looked again at the flame. It did not flinch. Neither did he. The night had quieted. The wind now whispered, not howled. The candle burned steady, neither low nor tall, balanced, like thought. Marcus sat, eyes half closed. His bones ached in familiar ways, not from age, but from memory. Then, a voice, outside, timid but close. "Imperator." A guard. Young, probably from Carthago Nova by his accent. Marcus opened the tent flap just enough to show his face. "Yes?" The soldier looked surprised. He hadn't expected a reply, let alone the emperor himself. He straightened, stammered. "Forgive me, I meant only to see if you required anything." "Warm water? A blanket?" Marcus looked at him for a moment. Then, something moved behind the boy's eyes. A thought, a weight. Marcus knew that look. The look of a question that had waited too long to be asked. He said gently, "Speak it." The boy hesitated. Then, Do you believe the gods are watching us?" Ah, not a tactical question, a spiritual one. Marcus stepped out of the tent. The cold bit at him, but he didn't flinch. He looked up at the sky. The stars were barely visible behind the haze of post-storm clouds. He said, "I believe something greater moves through us. Whether it has names, temples, or faces carved in stone, I do not know." The boy listened, eyes wide. Marcus continued, "I believe in the order of things, in cause and effect, in virtue and its reward. Not always in this life, not always in gold, but always, eventually." The soldier frowned slightly. "So, the gods are just ideas?" Marcus smiled, a tired smile, not cruel. "Number. The gods are mirrors. Some men see wrath, some see mercy, some see nothing. What matters is not what they are, but what they make us choose to be." The boy looked down, said softly, "I miss my mother. She prayed every morning, said the gods kept me safe. But I was almost killed last week. An arrow missed by inches." Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then perhaps she was right." The boy blinked. "How so?" Marcus said, "The gods do not stop arrows, but maybe they place something in the archer's hand. A tremble, a breath, a question. Just enough to miss." The boy breathed in, held it, then said, "I think I'll keep praying, just in case." Marcus nodded. "And that is faith." He turned back to his tent. Before closing the flap, he added, "Faith is not knowing. It is choosing. Choosing to hope, even when reason does not demand it." The guard stood still for a long time, then bowed, not as soldier to emperor, but as one soul to another. Inside, Marcus sat again. He picked up his journal, wrote, "Was asked tonight, do you believe the gods are watching? Answer, perhaps. But more important, am I watching myself? He underlined the last line, then added, Gods may inspire, but only man can act. He stared into the flame. It wavered slightly, as if unsure of its own shape. Marcus smiled. You too? He said. The flame danced, but held, just like faith. Marcus stood, his knees stiff, his breath visible in the cold. He stepped away from the desk, toward the low chest at the back of the tent, opened it. Inside lay his imperial cloak, purple, heavy, gold-threaded edges, thick as silence, the symbol of power, of Rome. He lifted it gently and laid it across his shoulders, not as armor, as memory. The weight was immediate, not from the fabric, but from what it meant. He walked to the small bronze mirror near the tent's entrance, looked at himself, the emperor, the figure carved on coins, etched in marble, chanted by crowds. But the eyes were just Marcus. Always had been, always would be. He whispered, This cloak does not make me wiser. He turned from the mirror, sat again. The cloak pooled behind him, like a shadow that knew too many secrets. He let his hands rest on it, then said aloud, This is not who I am. He remembered when he first wore it. He was 19. Lucius Verus had laughed and said, You look like a child in a funeral rug. But Marcus had stood tall, because he had believed that power was a duty, that titles were torches, not crowns, that he could serve Rome better from within the system than from outside it. Years later, he still believed those things, but belief came with bruises, and duty came with a price. He unfastened the brooch at his collar, let the cloak slide down his back. It thudded softly to the floor. He sat in his plain tunic, wool, simple, warm. Suddenly, he could breathe easier. He picked up his journal, wrote, Purple is not a color, it is a pressure. Power, when worn too long, forgets the shape of skin beneath it. He stood again, folded the cloak, placed it back in the chest, closed it, not with resentment, with respect, like placing a relic on a shelf, not because it was false, but because it was not needed, right now. He returned to his seat. The candle's flame flickered, responding to the shift in the tent, as if it too felt lighter. Marcus whispered, The emperor is asleep, but Marcus is still awake. He thought then, not of battles or speeches or senates, but of fishing with his uncle in a quiet stream, of reading by oil lamp until the words blurred, of holding Faustina's hand before the midwife arrived, moments where he was no one, and yet more himself than ever. He smiled, wrote, The cloak has its time, but the soul must breathe beyond the seams. He added, When I die, bury me in linen, not purple. I wish to meet the gods as Marcus, not as Caesar. The candle guttered, a long breath of wax and light. He cupped it gently, shielding it from a phantom wind, said quietly, I am not afraid to be just a man. It was just after the deepest hour, the time when even dreams fall asleep, when the firewood no longer crackles, when no footsteps echo between tents. Marcus opened the tent flap slowly. The cold kissed his face like a forgotten memory. He stepped out. No guard saluted him. No owl hooted. Even the wind seemed to pause, out of respect or exhaustion. Silence, not emptiness, but presence. He walked through the rows of tents, one hand brushing the canvas walls, the other holding nothing. For once. His sandals made no sound on the frozen earth. Only the stars kept him company, faint, still, unblinking, as if the gods themselves were watching but didn't wish to interrupt. He passed the barracks. Inside, the soldiers slept, some with open mouths, some clutching tokens, small wooden saints, rings, folded letters, some alone, some two to a blanket. Marcus did not enter. He only stood, listened, and breathed. Silence. True silence. Not the absence of noise, but the presence of everything that need not speak. The kind of silence that makes you remember who you are and what you've become. He walked toward the edge of the camp, where the sentries stood. Tonight they had built no fires, too dangerous, too visible. But he could see their shapes, dark outlines wrapped in furs, still as statues. He did not approach them. Let them do their duty undisturbed. Instead, he turned and looked back at the camp, the sleeping city of canvas and willpower, of men who kill, and men who question, and men who dream, all sleeping the same sleep now. He whispered, "This is Rome, too. Not the marble, not the Senate, but this, the hush between orders, the breath between battles, the soul of an empire, is its stillness." He sat on a rock at the edge of the slope. The wind returned, but it was gentle now. It wrapped around him like an old friend who knew when to stop speaking. He closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to see. And in that silence, he saw a boy running through wheat fields in Hispania, a man watching his firstborn breathe, a philosopher writing by oil light, not for fame, not for gold, but for clarity. He saw himself, not in armor, not in purple, but barefoot, kneeling by a river, drinking with his hands. He opened his eyes. The camp remained unchanged, but something within him had shifted. He whispered, "When Rome is quiet, I remember I am not its god, only its servant." He stood, stretched his arms, let the cold enter his bones, so he would not forget this moment. The silence speaks. I must learn to listen more often. He walked back, slow, deliberate. No one saw him. No one needed to. History rarely records silence, but it should, because sometimes it is the silence that saves us. Inside his tent again, he sat down before the candle. It was smaller now, like him, but still burning, like him. He returned to his bench, the candle still alive, barely, but still. A soft orange glow that reminded him of things he had yet to forget, and things he should never try to. He pulled the journal closer. The leather was worn smooth at the corners. Ink stains marked its past pages, some neat, some rushed, all honest. He opened to the next blank sheet, took the stylus, paused, not to think, but to listen, to the silence he had brought back with him, to the quiet inside his own mind. Then, slowly, he wrote, "Tonight, I was many things. A soldier, a son, a man lost in memory, a man found in silence. But most of all, I was awake." He stared at the words. They did not impress him. Good. They were not meant to. He continued, "I have ruled. I have fought. I have lost. I have loved. And in all of it, I have remained. Simply, Marcus." He breathed in, held it, then let the breath go, as if exhaling the weight of empires. He wrote, "No man escapes grief. No ruler escapes doubt. No sage escapes anger. But in writing, I have found a still place, a room within me no voice may enter without invitation. And in that room, I am no longer emperor. I am no longer great. I am simply still." The candle sputtered. Its flame curved like a question mark, but it did not go out. He smiled. Even the smallest light can outlive a storm. He set the stylus down, closed the book gently, not like a door, like a hand resting on another. He looked around the tent. Nothing had changed, but something had. Something soft, subtle, sacred. The kind of change that doesn't scream. It simply arrives and sits beside you, like an old friend or the truth. He stood, not to leave, just to stretch and to bow, not to the gods, not to the empire, to the moment, to the night, to the privilege of being alive and aware of it. He whispered, "I am not perfect, but I am present. I do not know what tomorrow will bring, but I know I am not afraid of it. And that is enough." The candle now bent lower. Wax spilled to the side. He cupped his hand around it once more, not to save it, to honor it. "Thank you," he said. To whom? He didn't know. Maybe to the night, maybe to life, maybe to Faustina, maybe to himself. It didn't matter, the words had been said. And that, too, was enough. The candle was dying, not suddenly, not tragically, just gently, like a voice running out of words, like a thought that no longer needed saying. Marcus sat still, the journal closed, the stylus put away. No robes, no crown, no armor, just a man and a light. Outside, the snow had stopped. The sky was charcoal, but with a soft gray at the edge, the whisper of dawn preparing itself. He did not go to meet it. He stayed where he was. Let the candle burn on. He did not need to think. He had thought enough. He did not need to remember. He had remembered enough. He did not need to feel wise. He had felt enough. He whispered, "It is not victory that matters, not power, not even understanding, but peace, within." He leaned forward, elbows on knees, head tilted slightly, watching the flame as if it were an old friend packing to leave. And in that glow, he saw moments. Faustina, asleep beside him, his children, arguing over who loved him more, rain on the tile roofs of the palace in Rome, the hush of the Colosseum before the crowd entered, the weight of the laurel crown on his brow for the first time, and then just silence. He breathed in deeply, let the air fill his chest, held it, then released it slowly, as if releasing the night itself. He whispered, "Thank you, old flame, for keeping me company. You've burned enough." The candle flickered twice, then faded. No drama, no smoke, just gone. And in its place,